My webcam is. Let's see. Why is it frozen? Okay. Um. Hi everyone. You can just look at my frozen face, but welcome to our quarter annual Pass the Salt interview. Today we have a really good, very interesting interview. Uh, so we're interviewing someone very interesting. His name is Shaun Jennings, and he is an art director. Sorry, I'm just hearing myself. Okay, there you go. Yeah. So he's an art director from Ubisoft. Oh wait, technical art director from Ubisoft, and he also is a photographer um, and yeah, he's very interesting. Okay, let me introduce you. Hello.
I know.
Oh
Yes.
my
Can you hear
gosh,
me?
sorry, I didn't hear anything.
Which
Oh,
involves supporting the art. Oh,
can we
yes.
start from the beginning? They didn't hear
Sure.
anything. Sorry. Oh my god, I always do this. Okay. So the first question was
Oh, before we go, should I be
yes.
watching the Twitch stream as well?
Oh yeah, you could definitely be watching them.
All
They're
right.
chatting in the side.
All right.
Uh,
Or can I rely on you? You'll just tell me if there's a question in the
yeah,
chat, and we
I'll
could.
do both
Okay.
too. You could do both.
All right.
Yeah. So so as thank you, Hane. We so my first question was the we are oh wait so Shaun is a technical art director, and I was asking him what is the difference between an art director and a technical art director, and what does an art director do?
Awesome. So an art director is in charge of the overall visual quality of the game, and so their role, they sort of drive the artistic or visual vision or direction of the game to complement the creative direction of the game. And so, for instance, maybe Watch Dogs, it's just like sort of semi-futuristic city. And so then the art director works with the concept team to help realize that and coordinate with the creative director. Technical direction is more of sort of a complement to the art direction, as well as we help ensure the game ships and runs well. And
Mm.
so this is known as the technical quality of the game. So generally, the tech art director works with a team of tech artists or some other tech directors or with programmers, engineers, and so we're part of the team. And we look after making sure that we build art that runs in the game, so we make the art as clean and efficient as possible.
Mm,
Another part of our role is supporting the art team, empowering the art team. And so it's really kind of like we might make tools, we might build shaders, so we get to make art with math and algorithms. These days, a sort of buzzword is procedural, which basically means using algorithms to populate a level. So this good
mm,
example of procedural is all the grass growing or the placement of trees is usually a mix of procedural and hand placed, and kind of so on. Some games, like Assassin's Creed or Watch Dogs, will use procedural techniques to build city buildings.
right. I it's like a little bit of a tangent. Isn't I heard with Assassin's Creed they like do it very historically accurate because so that how
Yeah.
would that be procedural?
Well, it's interesting because then everything has a pattern. And so really it comes down to the view of the player and what vision we're trying to sell. And
Mm,
so one thing that was really awesome, I'm going a little bit off topic, but Assassin's Creed and historical accuracy is they actually bring in like historians and experts to give us lectures and teach us. So my one sort of fun moment there was I actually sent an email to my old, I still talk to some of my old professors in university, and I said,
mm.
hey, by the way, we spent the last 3 hours at work arguing about how we're going to build Corinthian columns in the city. And so it's kind of like nerd jokes like that, but it's
Yeah.
it's pretty cool. They definitely do invest in making sure that we at least have a strong historical believability with
Mm.
what we build.
Wow. That's like it sounds like you're like you're in charge of like the game polish level. Like, oh, like this looks like it's working well. And like like the I don't know, the ultimate QA. It's like, oh, go do this again.
We do play that role, but I would almost break our role into a couple of pieces.
Mm.
So sometimes I like to make up weird little acronyms for things. So I would almost say like MRPB is a good sort of description of summarizing our role. So in the beginning of the project, there's sort of that mad scientist area where
Mm.
we have an idea and somebody's like, "Yeah, I want to make elephants fly in," and they get all excited and sometimes and you're like, "Yeah, okay," and your job is to really know the tech and know what tech is out there as well. So keep up on research and lectures. SIGGRAPH is a popular event for us. GDC a little bit as well. And then you get to prototype and you get to work directly with creatives, work directly with artists, work directly with programmers. Sometimes you get to go maverick and build it yourself with code,
Wow.
and you kind of work out an idea. Good example for that for me was Splinter Cell, the lens flares. I basically had an idea. I built it in Flash first, and then eventually we implemented it into the game for how we're going to do a lot of the rain effects and the lens flares and stuff. So I think that's sort of my favorite part of the production as well. The next part is really production readiness, and so like I think when you start getting into procedural or the larger games like an Assassins or Watch Dogs, or
Mhm.
even if you're looking at like Grand Theft Auto or something where the world is massive. So this is really about we have a massive team to build stuff, and we sort of have to now figure out how to take our bright idea or whatever creative implementation we did, whatever crazy prototype that we hacked together that looks cool, and now figure out how we're going to build this in mass and how we're going to build it consistently. So then
Mm.
this is the tools, this is the pipeline, this is building stuff, designing tools, working with people to figure out what they need and what works well for their workflows as well.
Mhm.
Um, and then at a certain point is once you get that, you sort of have to get into training people. You have to write documentation. You almost become like a teacher in a way. Like, okay, now
Mm.
guys, here's what we're gonna do. Here's how we're gonna build. Here's why these steps are important, and
Right.
we sort of build from there.
It sounds like
Oh
oh, yes.
no, sorry. Please ask a question.
Oh, no. Did you want to add something?
Yeah, there's two other phases. So then
All
the
right.
the next
Okay.
two is the maintenance phase, and that's sort of now that we built all this crazy stuff, it's kind of stable, but we did just build it for the first time. So you do spend time tuning it. You're
Mm.
working with artists and sort of enforcing and reinforcing whatever guidelines and best practices we came up with. Um, Optimization, making sure that sometimes it gets a little bit crazy. You might be running around the game and your camera flips and looks at one direction, and all of a sudden the frame rate drops.
Right,
There might be a
right.
little bit too much art there, and our job is to work with the team to optimize that in some
Right, right.
cases. The final phase is really closing, and so that's the sort of B at the end, and that's bug fixing. And
Mm.
so here it's really just let's do what we need to do to get the game out the door, optimize if we need to optimize, whatever bugs come up. There are some awesome surprises that come up in there. You're like, well, we didn't know it would work that way, but now we got to fix it. So there's a lot of stuff like that. So that's sort of
Yeah.
the end. And our, I guess that kind of thumbs the job up. I feel like there's a lot of questions you might have.
Yeah, no, it just sounds like you have like a lot of tool sets that you've probably gathered over the years. Like, how did that even like that process even happen? Like, was like I don't imagine like Shaun at like 5, like, oh, I want to grow up and be a technical art director. Like, how was like your journey like in your career or like schooling to get to like the technical art field?
I didn't even know technical art existed
Yeah.
until I got into the games. So it's a long story. I was one of those nerdy kids. I had a Commodore 64 and I had circuit boards at home and I did that kind of stuff. When I got to college and or university, I really, really love programming and computer science, but I
Mm.
also love art and animation. So at the time, I was doing freelance work as a web developer and I was doing graphic design. So I said, you know what? Let's go to school and learn how to do that. And so
Mm.
that's sort of where it started. But there's opportunities along the way to get back into computer science. So whenever I had electives or like, oh, let's take some extra courses. Why? I have no idea. And so then you start getting more into the programming. And so I took a ton of like C++ and some design and just kind of, I basically followed a large portion of the curriculum. If I were
Mm.
to go back to school, I'd probably just finish that second degree. Um, so I have a lot of formal training, but over the years, a lot of things change. In the very beginning, I was fairly self-taught as well. My goal was to either end up in film or
Mm.
games once I sort of knew what the industry is, but I didn't really know exactly what my role was. I grew up really being in awe of the magicians that I call technical directors in film, which is a little bit different than technical direction in games.
Mm.
And so I love VFX. I've always had a passion for that. When I was in Sheridan, I spent a lot of time playing with flocking algorithms and having insects fly around and learning that kind of stuff.
That's really
And
cool.
doing my art too. But essentially, when I was applying for work, a lot of the game companies, and maybe it's the way that I presented myself, and I was very technical forward in a lot of ways, and game companies like, oh, well, you can come here and do stuff, and so. I'm thankful for the opportunity to have been able to find a job in the game industry.
Yeah, that sounds like that's like yeah, you know, like I like when I first heard it, I was like, oh, I didn't even know that job existed, and like I have been in the art field for quite a while. It's just like it's such a interesting title. Like for sure, I've heard of art directors, I've heard like creative art directors, but yeah, technical art directors. Is it like you were saying how it's different from movie art technical art directors? Like, do you know the differences? Or?
So there's usually in our company, in my company, UB at least, there's a couple of varieties of sort of technical art. So there's, or sorry, tech direction. So you sort of
Mm.
have your tech director. You can't see my hand. Let's try that again. Tech director, which is usually somebody coming from a programming background or somebody very, very experienced and well versed in multiple disciplines across the in the production floor. And then you have your specialty tech directors, which would be tech director art, tech director design. You have a tech director specifically for characters, and kind of so on, and sort of whatever like sections you need for the project. Big companies tend to be very segmented and sort of geared towards specialty, whereas small companies, you're just like, oh, you're the tech artist? Sure, you do everything, which I've done that role as well, where you
Yeah.
just kind of like, oh, we need cinematic, so we need tools. Oh, animation? Do you animation? No, I don't do animation. You do today, okay. And you just kind of follow along, and it's fun, especially early in the
Mhm.
career, because you get to learn. Like if somebody was just starting out today and they said I wanted to be in tech art, um, there are opportunities, I think, to work with a bigger company like ours, which I didn't know about when I was starting out. But another sort of interesting, it just depends on what you want to do, is go with a smaller company and do everything. and you will gain a ton of experience. And when you apply to the bigger company, you just look that much more attractive.
Right. Yeah, it's wouldn't it almost be more intimidating being in like a smaller company because like oh the whole company is relying on you to do everything. It's like oh gosh, like what if I can't do it?
Not necessarily, because a smaller company tends to be a bit more cross discipline. So, like big company, I have a texture artist, and then I have a texture artist for props. I have a different texture artist for environment,
Mm-hmm.
biomes, which would be all of your plants and vegetation, which is a specialty in itself. And then you have a different texture artist for characters, and then even within that, there might be other divisions. So it just depends.
Mm.
Whereas I think smaller companies like I need a texture. You're good at Photoshop or you're good at Substance Painter or Substance Designer or whatever tool, Mari, whatever you want to talk, like
Yeah.
tool you want to go with. And you can end up wearing a couple of hats. The divisions are a little bit different too, where maybe there is no such thing as a dedicated texture artist in a
Mm.
smaller company. You might be modeling, you might be doing everything. And I literally did everything at one point in time,
Right.
and you're not necessarily on your own, and like it depends on the team and the quality of the management in the company. um if you're working together with a good group, generally you all have your back, and that sounds a bit utopian, but if the synergy and the relationship is there, it can be a wonderful experience. It
Mm.
can be a painful one as well, but it's always a mix, and like it's about having the right mindset and staying grounded within the experience. So I think this is where I'm really thankful for friends and family throughout the experience. I'm thankful for my church family throughout the
Mm-hmm.
experience. And, I've definitely had a lot of support along the way.
Yeah. So how would you like describe, I guess, maybe like how God played a role in like I guess getting to where you are? Like was it more like kind of like Ruth where it's like God was there but not really like hands on like everything, or was it more like, I don't know, like Book of Judges or with like it's like oh God, just give me a sign, and then the sign happened, and like where what how did God play in like this journey to technical art director?
For me, I feel like it was a slow and arduous path. I've always been very well, I couldn't say I was always been focused, but I went through a period where I was very, very focused
Mm.
on school or getting a job or whatever goal I had in front of me at the time. So I
Mhm.
think the first part is really like and it's a part of the mindset to sort of help deal with the pressure in some respect. Whereas you kind of have to be open to sort of let God be part of that. So then, if you are stressed out, do you just go for a walk and mull over the thing that's stressing you out, or do you spend time in prayer, or do you pop open the Word and sort of use that? And I can definitely say that, like, if I just stress and go for the walk,
Mhm.
it's satisfying. But if I stress and spend time in prayer, or stress and call up my brother or sister in Christ, or a
Mm.
family member, and actually talk and pray over it, it's a bit different,
Right.
is what I can say. So for me, I would say, as far as God's involvement in the process, it was a process and a path. And I wasn't always open minded, and I wasn't
Mhm.
always attentive in the way that I need to be. And I think I'm consistently a work in progress in that respect. So like scriptures that like I repeat over and over as growing up, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me.
Mhm.
Um, Another one, when things get a little bit crazy, God has not given us a spirit of fear, but one of power, love, and a sound mind. And it's really sort of like use that as a means to stop and center. But then like the funny thing for me as a kid is that I was always very technical. So like when I broke the family Commodore 64,
Mm.
I eventually got another one, but my mom's like, "You're not allowed to touch it until you read the whole manual." So I actually read the whole manual. I don't think I understood it back then, but I read it. And
That's awesome.
I like owner's manuals. I will ask for directions, and that was an important lesson. But I think when it comes to my spiritual health, um, the Bible is actually incredibly intuitive in some ways. And if I'm open to see it, I think when people say this sort of axiom of God knows us better than we know ourselves, human beings are creatures of pattern. and we
Mm-hmm.
repeat the same patterns now that we did back in the Bible time. So we're not that different in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like when you look back, it's all there and he kind of presents it. So I feel like, how do I deal with this? Just go read the word more. And I think one thing that my pastor is always emphasizing is you really got to know the word and read it as much as you can. I'm still
Mm-hmm.
working on that, and sometimes I'm reading other
Me
stuff
too.
too. But it's as I get older and the more that I take in, the more that I kind of like, oh, I see the connection there. Okay, this is not as bad as I thought it was.
Mm.
And so you kind of just it kind of just builds and grows. Another important lesson that I learned is that I used to be very, very job focused. And if you suck at your job, I kind of thought you sucked as a person.
Oh,
So it's a little bit deep in that respect. So I was pretty
yeah.
harsh. I never said it to people, but this is the inside brain
Yeah,
going.
yeah.
And so I had an opportunity at the company that I was before, Ubi, and I really got a chance to work with people and help solve problems. And I was frustrated there and I wanted to leave. But the lesson that I got was God puts you where you need to be. And I think I really needed to be there because there's a lot of good lessons that I learned. And
Mm-hmm.
honestly, I wouldn't be able to do the job that I'm doing now if I didn't go through a lot of those lessons.
Right. Would as like I guess you consider yourself an artist, right? No? Yes.
Um, yes and no. Um, I focused on graphic design and then I got all procedural with it and then photography. And so I do draw. I did
Mm.
paint once upon a time, but I never thought that I focused on that stuff as much as I could have.
Mm.
I'm slowly picking it up again now. And so, yes, I'm an artist. But
Photography is
then,
an art too.
yeah, I would say that the art that I've created in the past, like I've done shows in galleries as well in the past, and
Mm-hmm.
I would say it's very much on the contemporary art spectrum, but a lot of it wouldn't quite qualify as the fine art spectrum. And
Mm-hmm.
then there's commercial art as well.
Yeah. Well, even with that, like I think what goes hand in hand is I think artists have a lot of pride in their work, and like it sounds like you also are very like hardworking and like put a lot of pride and effort into your work, and like I think I think at least for myself, one of the biggest struggles is dealing with pride and being like, oh, this is I did this versus like, oh, God did this for me, or and like that's constant struggle of like glorifying God versus like, no, I did all the hard work. I got the interview. I made the portfolio. Like this is all me, right? Like how did you kind of like I guess battle that?
So there's a lot of things to unpack in there.
Mm.
I think like for me, it's sort of like so for me, like as a technical artist or now a technical director, I still think of myself as a technical artist. And so I look back at like art history and like I hated art history when I was in school, but I love it now.
Mhm.
And it's Leonardo da Vinci for me was an artist that had multi facets, and he was essentially a technical artist because he was also an inventor, and some might
Mhm.
even consider him a science. I don't know if a scientist is a bit of a stretch, but he definitely got a lot of little sort of titles over the years.
Mhm.
One of the foundations of art for me is creating something out of nothing. And so it's like I have something, I've got a bunch of pieces. I got to put them together and make something compelling. Or in a more traditional sense, here's a blank sheet of paper, here's a broom and some paint, go and make something cool. And so I think when you get into the sense of God and how I define him, it's like, well, maybe he was the first artist. He made something out of nothing. He made a bunch of things out of nothing. And now we've got a planet with people and creatures running around. So
Mhm.
I think I sort of look back at that. And then when I do struggle with creativity, because like while it might not be like, here's this really awesome picture, you also have to creatively problem solve and think out of the box a little bit or force yourself to look out of the box sometimes when it's not even when it's not comfortable. And I think for myself, it's like I do I want to sort of go back to God. And I think whenever something is especially like writer's block type of situation, you spend time in prayer, spending time in the word, and then for some reason it always tends to start making sense at some point. Um, For myself personally, one thing I really love is that's why I love serving like in my church or whatever organization and doing like graphics work or motion graphics or whatever ends up coming up. Because the nice thing is there, it's a very friendly structure in a sense that instead of me like like for big Ubisoft projects, they're flying people to Paris and they're taking pictures and they're bringing historians in.
Mm.
Well, for stuff for like church or some sort of organization, it's usually going to be scripture based, and so serving in that capacity, it's a lot of work, but it's kind of a sort of a tool I think God's using in my life to sort of pull me back into scripture. And then over the years, as I served more, and I always kind of went through this process where I'm like, I don't know what I'm gonna make. They don't know what I want to make. I don't know what I want to make. And then you sit down in scripture and you're like, oh, okay, I get it.
Eh,
It's like some inspiration, and then you're over the years you start applying that to your work life. It doesn't
mm.
just stay relegated in your oh, I'm in church, I'm going to use scripture. When I'm in work, I'm going to use Google. It doesn't
Yeah,
quite work
yeah.
that way. And so when you're working, and it's kind of a very personal thing in a way where it's like, okay, how am I going to get grounded in this situation? This is really driving me crazy. This isn't. Sometimes it's pretty can be pretty stressful, and then you just kind of need to snap back in. I think the sort of second point is that, and it's all over the word, where we're not alone. Like we always have to interact with one another, and I
Mhm.
do believe that in addition to God putting you where you need to be, He also puts the people in your life that need to be there when they need to be there. So, and I've had brothers and like just friends and or church family member, whatever, like people that are in communication at some point or happen to call me at the right time, and that's been very helpful. And I think I don't believe in coincidences. I do believe in God's plan for things.
Mm.
And so
I agree.
these things happen for a reason. There's all checks and balances. When I look at systems, one thing you hear me say a lot at work or probably during this conversation is I think this is an ecosystem, and game engine is an ecosystem. Every single system affects another in some way, form, or fashion. And I think for that, like with life, a lot of things are interconnected in that way, and then God's at the center of that.
Mm. So I guess kind of going on with that, like, so how do you like balance like life and work and your like relationship with God and work? Like, how does that work for you?
It's tricky because on one hand, being in a technical field, you need to spend time reading. So like when PS4, PS5 came out and Xbox One Series X, got to go and study. Like the minute you know that the console generation is going to end, the console generations are average like 4 years, 5 years, maybe 3 years. You need to make sure you're aware of what's out there. So that's going to talks, reading papers, sitting down and improving some skill set. As an artist, you should always be working on your skills at some point. And so there's your main projects, but then there's stuff you're going to do to maintain your skill set and keep it relevant. And so I think that's a duality that a lot of people that I've talked to don't fully understand, but there are believers in the industry, and they're always a pleasure when they pop up and we have that conversation. So for me, it's really kind of about prioritization somewhere in there and maybe a bit of shake of discipline in there somewhere.
Mm.
And so it's very tricky to do. I have my seasons when I'm really good at it, and I have my seasons when I've somehow gone off the rails. And so I
Mhm.
think for me, it's really just the continual struggle and aiming to strive to do better.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. So I guess you do have Christian friends in your workplace, or not too many?
A few over the years. There aren't many. But then like I'd say that it's weird because like God definitely reveals people to you over time. Um, I think for myself, like I don't hide it, like, but I also don't like I'm not like waving stuff in front of people's faces.
Mhm.
So it just I think one thing that as I mature, maybe there is going to be a time when somebody's just going to ask me like, how are you able to deal with this situation or something? Um, and I think in terms of calling and even you get into sort of the light in the situation, um, I think a part of it is a bit of a governance in there somewhere. Like for myself, I think an important factor is never forget that I'm working with human beings and people. They are not made of zeros and ones. Um, so it's kind of that, and there in the leadership position, there's also a bit of a service and caring for the people that are under you. I mean, yes, you have to get results. Yes, expectations can be very high, but there's also things that you can keep in mind and be attentive to. So I think that's part of it. I just got went off on a little bit of a tangent there.
Yeah.
I'm not
No,
sure if I
it's all
answered the
right.
question.
That's fine. But like, I guess like as we are called to I don't know, share the gospel with everyone, and be light and salt in our communities, and um is that something you find challenging, and uh especially in a more like PC culture, and um like, or I guess maybe like how you are doing it in your workplace?
I think it's very challenging. I think the PC culture. I'll be careful. I'm not sure how to say this nicely, but it's very anti in a lot of ways. And that also shapes policy in companies. So you do have to be mindful about things, but um, like I think it's really about how you live and just like we know like it's unrealistic to know think that you're not going to be imperfect and you're going to make mistakes. Um, but I think it does come down to sort of like simple things like ethics in your execution and keeping
Mm-hmm.
that in the forefront. And I think I don't think that's the answer, but I do think that's a starting point.
That's good. Yeah, I think it's always hard to, I don't know, share with people in your coworkers, 'cause, like at least for myself, like, oh, I'm afraid of like what they think of me, and like if I do say I'm a Christian, they'll be like, oh, like why are you swearing? Aren't you a Christian? Like, and like stuff like that is just very like, oh, I'm like, it can be very like burdensome sometimes.
I
Um,
think I think on that topic, um, just bear with me.
mhm,
I think so. This is sort of like a me thing, but I don't necessarily do the mission. Like it's not our role to start from the beginning. Okay, here's a track, and then I come back to you in 6 months. Let's read the Bible together and pray together. Then I come back to you 6 months. Hey, come join my church. And like
yeah,
that's I don't think that's how it works. I think it's really about the Holy Spirit's work in our heart, and I think we each play our role in a bigger picture.
mhm,
And like it's kind of like it's weird because that's the thing I like about big company is you play a role in a bigger picture. Um, it's not about me and it's not necessarily about my individual accomplishments. It's about how I support the team.
mhm,
And I think when I think about my role as a believer in terms of God's calling, I think the prayer that I ask is, God, what's my role? Or maybe another prayer is that I'm prepared for when the role is. And as a believer, I want to spend time learning and knowing the nature of God. So spending time in Word, spending time in prayer, and just kind of building, like focusing on that relationship a bit. Because part of me thinks, like in time, it will kind of work itself out in a way. It's not going to necessarily be of my power, but it's of God's.
mhm.
Um, Many years ago, I used to teach martial arts, and everybody like depending on who comes in your school, they want to be Bruce Lee, or they're like, "Why am I not jump kicking? My kid needs to be able to jump kick," you know. And I'm just like, "Well, he's 5. I don't think he's going to jump kick anytime soon." But it's really like it's about technique and making sure you do the right technique. If you do good, smooth technique, consistent technique as your body adapts and you build strength in your muscles and you build more comfortable with the technique, if all your mechanics are right and everything is done properly and everything aligns and works properly, then in time, it's just going to get faster. It doesn't get faster because I'm like, I'm going to make it fast. If you have a bow staff in your hand and you force it to be too fast, you're going to clip yourself in the head one time too many. And
Were you
then you have
doing
that.
kung fu? What kind of?
Oh, I did lots of stuff back in the day. And so I sort of have these analogies that I kind of carry over.
Mm,
And so with my career, one thing that I'm learning is that it's more about being ready.
Mm,
than punching things and forcing my way through.
yeah, that's very
Um,
wise. So, I guess what are some, I guess, your some of your favorite things about your job or some of your favorite projects? Maybe if you have something you'd like to show us too, that's be awesome.
sure, I have a little trailer that I prepared for you. See if I can
Yeah,
get that ready. All right. Don't think you're going to get any sound, but I'll just talk you through it. So, hi, my name is Shaun Jennings. I am a technical art director, but also I think of myself as a technical artist. I think I've said I've been making video games for roughly about 15 years now. I have worked on everything from a couple of X-Men games way back in the
I
day.
love X-Men.
Um, this is really old footage, but I did a crowd scene.
Oh,
Um, I've actually worked on two X-Men games. I worked with a company called Silicon Knights. I worked with Vicarious Visions for a little while. Did some stuff for that game. Oh yeah, Ultralines 2. Just some other stuff. Trailers. Let's see, Human. That was my very first game that I actually my second game that I worked on. My
wow.
first game that I worked on was with a startup company that never released anything in Philadelphia. Um, and one of the things that I did is because like the very first thing I did as a technical artist is I came from a web development background.
Mm,
So they're like, we need help on the menu system. Sure. I was eager and I would just do whatever I was told. So it was cool. It was good learning. Eventually I turned the 2D menus into a 3D menu, so that was fun.
yeah, that's
Um,
awesome.
and then Ubisoft, my favorite project of all time was Splinter Cell Black Ops. Um,
Oh,
I helped out in a bunch of areas in this project. I'd say my favorite thing that I helped on was with a lot of the lens flares and lens dirt and a lot of some of the atmospherics in the game that I worked on with lighting
mm,
artists and 3D programmers. Um, and let's see what else we got. So yeah, it's the last game in the reel. My second most favorite project of all time was Far Cry Primal. Um, and I don't know everything from snow to I can't remember. Um, helping to just kind of supporting the team overall to get that out of the door. Had some chance to play with some fun effects on that game as well.
awesome. Do you wanna pop your camera back on? Oh,
Oops, here you go.
do you have any like I don't know your favorite like photography pictures or like anything like in your other projects in general that you've done?
Yes. Well, my passion is really just about I love lighting. I love looking at the effects of lighting. One of my favorite sort of pastimes is time lapse photography, and then
Oh
just
yes.
get up at like 3 in the morning, sit in a chair, and literally just watch the sunrise and how the shadows move from point A to point B. It's always I guess some people would call that a magical experience. You're just like, oh yeah, God made that, and then you start getting into all the mechanics of lighting and how rays bounce around places and things, and you're just like, wow, that's really cool and complicated. And it's just really just a big sort of appreciation moment for me.
Mm,
Um, my other passion is food. I like cooking, and then I like taking pictures of the things I cook, and
yes.
then sometimes I like take pictures of the things other people cook, and that's kind of ballooned into food photography is my other thing that I do on the side and just mostly for fun.
Yeah. No. I've seen your Instagram and they're like so good. Um, as you're like talking about impression, like lighting and stuff, all I'm thinking about is like impressionism and painting and like, what do you like? If would that be like your favorite painting era or like
Um,
art era? Because that's
actually,
what it's all about, right? Lighting.
I go a little bit nerdy on you. I feel like the Baroque period. I think it was the Baroque. Now I feel like I have to look that up. Well, I'll just talk about the artist, and I won't
Yeah.
try to pretend I know art history. Is Rembrandt, and it's really about how it's oil paintings, and he sort of layered the oil in a way where if you lit it properly, the light actually kind of went through the painting and created some interesting lighting effects.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I'd say he's probably one of my favorites. There's actually a cool documentary on Final Fantasy, The Spirits Within. I think it's the first 3D movie. One of my teachers worked on that long ago.
So cool.
And so it's in the documentary they talk about Rembrandt and then the sort of phenomena of subsurface scattering, which is basically a ray entering and then not quite coming out of the surface, but kind of bouncing around and like breaking apart and all that stuff. And that's your human skin. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's kind of they talked about that, and I think it's one of the earlier movies to really attempt a human being
Mm-hmm.
character. um, so I think that was my favorite one. And then there's another artist, and I can't remember what period he is from, Jan van Eyck. And he's known for doing really, really detailed paintings. And so he's known for painting with a single strand brush. And
Mm.
like literally, he has a painting inside of a painting inside of a painting inside of a painting. When you look at his
Dang.
paintings and you break out a magnifying glass, you're like, oh, there's a whole painting in there. And it's kind of cool.
Yeah. I remember. I think one of that reminds me of a painting. I don't know what it's called, but it was like these three like panels, and it's like a depiction of a cow, and like this whole like three panels are like just looks like Where's Waldo, but with like bunch of people being tortured and like very small and detailed, and like it's like yeah, you take a magnifying glass and like if you like you could it's like a different composition everywhere you went.
It
But
sounds almost like either Mannerist painting period or Impressionist period, where we had like the melting. I think the Mannerist period is the melting clock painting that everybody sees, and stuff like that. There's a lot of weird paintings during that time period. We're
yeah.
just like, I don't really know what I'm looking at here, but it's really well done, and you
Yeah.
just kind of go. And it's really, I think those periods are. There might be a bit of a humanistic aspect to it, but it's also sort of breaking reality and breaking the norm, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah. What about I remember you told me like you used to be like a film nerd, and um like did you have any like favorite films or like oh even games and stuff like
Well, let's start with games.
okay.
And so I would say that my favorite game of all time is Super Mario Brothers 3.
Super Mario, so OG.
It is. It is an 8-bit Nintendo, or sorry,
Yeah.
is it? Yeah,
It's
8-bit
Super
NES.
Nintendo, yeah.
It's the thing about Mario 3 is that I growing up as a kid, I had the Nintendo Power magazines and I found all the warp zones and I beat the game in record time and I got
What?
all the flutes and skipped it. And then the thing is, you're actually missing 2/3 of the game. So I guess it's around like a couple years ago, a buddy of mine, we picked up Mario All Stars, which has the save game feature, which the original game doesn't have a save game
Mm.
feature. And then we played it. I think it was on a Super Nintendo, and yeah, I still have my Super Nintendo. And we're just like we played a little bit each night, but then our sort of pact with each other was we're not going to skip anything. And I think this is when I was kind of had the aha moment in the game. I'm like, oh, wait, it's not just hand-eye coordination. There's puzzles. Oh, now I understand why World 8 is so hard. It's because I didn't understand it. I wasn't thinking about it. But now at this point, I've been making games for a couple of years. Like I already had understood a little bit of the design, and so
Mm.
looking at it, it's like I really have to think and like we have to stop and like analyze these patterns, and it's really
Yeah.
cerebral in a lot of ways. I'm like, wow, like no wonder people are saying this game is like kind of like a baseline for level design. um, it's Mario 3 took a lot of really big risks where they sort of broke the mechanic of platforming gaming. A
Mm.
lot of things they did define or had an influence on modern platforming gaming. They added lots of mechanics, they added the powers, they added the suits, and all kinds of things. So yeah, that was my favorite game of all time, just because it kind of slapped me in the face with just how smart it was designed.
Yeah.
Number two was Mega Man 2, actually, by Capcom. And so I had a love affair with Capcom games of that era because of the music, actually. I
Oh.
just love their music. If I've actually like tried to make my own 8-bit music at different points in time, and it's just I love the boss fights and everything about it. So I ended up really getting into those games, and just holy smokes, those games are hard. And like the Mega Man series, I feel like it's all about hand-eye coordination, and they do some puzzles and things, but it's so hard. You have to really play it. One game that I liked but I never beat was Battletoads, because that's even harder. It's like nobody would make a game like that today. It just doesn't exist.
Yeah.
But those games are pretty crazy. Modern day games, it's tricky. I like to bounce around a lot. I was playing a bit of Tomb Raider for a while, and
Good
then
game.
well, the graphics are amazing. The last two Tomb Raiders are just
Mhm.
insane.
Yes.
Um, these days it's tricky because I have to turn off the part of my brain that wants to like, oh, how did they do that? And you start sometimes I play a little bit of Call of Duty or Halo with
Yeah.
friends, and then like you're running around, and I love the behind the scenes, and I love
Yeah.
the art of the game. So I could be playing like Halo, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, it's such a pretty vista,
Yeah.
and you get shot and you die, and you're like, I shouldn't have been looking at the vista. I should have been focusing on beating you. So it's kind of like that. Yeah. Um, Movies, it's tricky. I would say that when I was a student and even growing up, I really hadn't seen very many movies, but I've watched so many documentaries on PBS and other channels and rented VHS tapes. I'm aging myself right now. Um, from the library, and I love the behind the scenes, and that's a big influence on why I ended up getting into more technical side of the creativity, because I just really was in awe of the problem solving and thinking of ways to make this crazy vision come to life. And so
Mhm.
I think growing up, like after I graduated and I finally got like my first couple of jobs, I just started going to movies all the time. My most recent favorite was Spider-Man Enter the Spider-Verse. I think it's a marvel artistically. They did some many cool things, like with all the ink effects and stuff like that, and creating like sort of a stop motion like animation feeling, and then just like their storytelling in terms of use of color is just it feels almost textbook to me. Is really strong. I would say that Spider Verse is a close second. It's almost like I can't pick between the
Oh,
two. The
Spider-Verse
first
is so
Incredibles
good.
movies.
Yeah. Oh, Incredibles also really good.
Brad Bird is one of my favorite directors. Iron Giant is up there as well.
Yes. So good.
Incredibles for me was a masterclass on using colors for storytelling.
Mm. What is like you were saying before, like how what's it called? Like how you're saying like when you're playing games and you like, oh, it's like that vista so beautiful. Like I know with like a lot of people in like the career of like that are whatever career you're involved in, you start like critiquing it. For instance, like if you're a graphic designer, you look at a poster and be like, oh, it's such bad kerning, or like a stereo compositor will be like, oh, 3D movies, I can't watch it. There's so many artifacts, or like like do you find like maybe like because you're working in the art industry, do you like is it too distracting to play a game or like um or like does it affect that kind of vibe? I don't know.
Absolutely. All of the above. And so I think like over the years, like with friends, you just learn not to talk about it at all. Because you're analyzing in your brain and they're talking about how cool it was or how bad the story was or something. And so I just it took me a while to turn it off. So with games, it does take me a while to sort of suspend that. Because like my go-to is kind of find the bugs. Like
Mm,
I think one project, like I have a rule for myself. Anything I worked on, don't play it for an entire like wait till a year after it's released and then maybe play
mm,
it. So it depends on what I worked on the project, like because you kind of have all the like because I'm working with the level art team and the props team, so I probably got like the entire world memorized at this point.
right.
So it's like you don't really want to play it anymore.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
know exactly how to break the game, so I know
Yeah.
how to create the bugs. So I'm just like, I need a break.
You'd be like a great speed runner.
No, our testers are amazing. No, like I'm not as good as them. Like they impress me. Like every single time I work with a tester, I'm just impressed. Like, but they've played the game so many times, like that's their job.
Yeah.
But for myself, um, yeah, because I had graphic design background, so I do see kerning issues everywhere. Photography, I definitely do see lighting issues. I'm
Yeah.
like, if ads look like that, why can't I do it? But the reality is, like, you definitely have a respect for the person. Like, I'm just a Saturday morning, like, weekend photographer,
Yeah.
or designer or whatever. Like, I do have a lot of respect for doing for the people that do the job all the time, and that actually does wrap into the role of a tech art, or especially tech direction, because even in the more traditional sense in a big company, you kind of have to understand a little bit about everybody that you're supporting.
Mm.
And ideally, you know enough about everybody's job that you could do their job, maybe not as well as they would do it or as fast as they would do it, but you have to have a deeper understanding of what they're doing,
Mhm.
what kind of problems they're facing, because you do have to anticipate things.
Yeah.
um, so it's, or sometimes you have to advocate for a given, thing, and so it's a bit of that. So yeah, it's over time you do learn how to turn it off. So then, like, if I see a movie, or I listen to a song, or I see a photo, or I see some graphics on the wall, and my brain doesn't go to that place where I want to analyze it, then that's the best stuff for me.
Mm.
So like watching Spider Verse,
Oh.
I did watch a ton of documentaries after it,
Yeah. Yeah.
to understand, like, how did you do that? I never thought
Yeah.
about this. This is so cool. And you kind of geek out.
Yeah.
But watching the movie, I was just like enthralled in the story and
Yeah.
the experience, and like the music, everything just kind of worked together so well for that
So good.
film. And so for me, it's kind of, that's sort of the criteria. If my brain doesn't go, if I'm watching your entire thing, or I'm enjoying your entire work or piece, and I don't start like getting into that technical phase or analytical phase, then it's like, wow, that was really well done. It was so cohesive and, well executed, and everything. Whereas if I watch something and my brain's like, I'm like, it's not too good. It wasn't pleasurable. I'm not going to watch that again unless I have to, kind of.
Yeah. I think that's a really good, like when you said like, oh, I wait a year and stuff. I think that's so like it's so healthy. Like definitely like, but also like I remember when I was working in like the movie industry, like I'm just like stuck with like 30 frames for like a day or two. I'm like, oh god, I don't want to see this anymore. It's like, oh, I know like every single frame. It's like, oh god, kill me. But yeah, it's just, I think it's good. I'm just gonna open up to, I guess, chat. If anyone has any questions for Shaun, yeah, they could type it in now. And while they are thinking up some questions, uh, do you want to share any like resources for people, or maybe like things that you could like give tips for people who might want to be interested in your field or something similar?
Sure. Actually, let me just pull up a couple links for you. So I would say that if anybody is sort of, and I'm looking up because I have a screen up there that I'm looking at, my production monitor. It's the last one. Well, let me see if I can share my screen. Perfect. Um, so what I would say is, for anybody that's looking to get into industry, even if you're not 100% sure of what you're going to do, um, I would say the first thing is, like, at least for the moment, and the industry is definitely evolving, is
Mm-hmm.
fluid in the sense that it's very sort of results driven.
Mm.
Um, so yes, if you go to a school and go to a program and get a degree, or some sort of education somewhere, that's good, and that's a reinforcer, and that's really giving you a level of agility to once you actually get in the field, so you can adjust and try different things.
Yeah.
but it's really about creating content, creating things. And so that part of that is going to be get involved with professional organizations. So one organization is the oh, I pulled up the wrong one. Let me try that again. Just gonna switch to my camera. Sorry. There we go. That is much better. Let's try this again. All right. So the first one that I remember mentioned for games specifically is the IDGA, the International Game Developers Association. IDGA has a Toronto chapter,
Mm.
and at least pre-COVID, they had a very good sort of array of both free events and pay events. They have free lectures and different types of we like to call postmortem talks, where people come and talk about their experiences on the project. They also have a lot of paid stuff. They also have like cheaper rates for students if you do want to get a membership, and sort of go through there, make connections, find a mentor along the way to sort of help you with your career and getting into the industry. The second one that I would mention is SIGGRAPH. So SIG is part of a big computer science organization. And
Mm.
computer graphics, most artists don't realize this, but every time you put a color on the palette or you put you change a button on a material or a shader when you're rendering, or even if you're in VFX and you're stuck rotoscoping for like what feels like an eternity, every single button you press, every single feature you do, you're essentially doing math, whether you realize it or not. So you're applying some sort of algorithm that creates the magic that we call visual art. And so there's a sort of sorry ACM, SIG, and then SIGGRAPH is the computer graphics portion of it. So SIGGRAPH every year has a large conference. It moves around. They have a couple of locations. So they have the North America one, they have Asia one, they have like an India one and a few country. But for the North America one, usually the conference will be in a different location each year. Sometimes it's in the United States, sometimes it's in Canada. I think one year they had it in Mexico once. The cool thing about that is the rates for a student are demonstratively cheaper than they are
Mm.
for a professional. They have student volunteers. So one of the cool things about a student volunteer with SIGGRAPH is that, especially if you get to work out for a session and support maybe a speaker or a presenter, be mindful of the kind of stuff that you think you want to do. You don't have to be definitive on that at that early stage. And then
Mm.
try to get involved with something like that. And then you get to talk to the person. I had the rare opportunity of working with one of my professors, and we presented in the contemporary art exhibit for SIGGRAPH, I think 2 years in a row. And
Mm.
so the cool thing is you get invited to all the behind the scenes like lunches and dinners and meet and greets, and you get to meet people, and like I got to meet Yosh Dan from Autodesk, that is like the brain behind a bunch of like cool effects that Maya did back in the day.
Cool.
And so it's like I think he was sitting at our table, which is freaky, and he's so tall, and it's kind of cool. So these are good sort of points to both make potential connections for the industry.
Mm.
When I was looking at schools, I remember going to SIGGRAPH and I was wandering around the job fair and I was thinking, do I want to go to Sheridan? Do I want to go to this school? Do I want to go work for a company? And I had the pleasure of meeting people from ILM. I got to meet people from SIGGRAPH, or sorry, from Sheridan and all over. So they have job fairs as well if you are already in the industry and you're looking to sort of move around. So it's just a good sort of connection point. I think the reality of post COVID life is conference will never be the same again. So there is a huge online component. So the next one I'm going to mention is the Game Developer Conference every year.
Ooh.
And so again, they do have a strong sort of student showing, and they do make it easy for students, really cheap or free in some cases for students to get in. Both SIGGRAPH and GDC post COVID with the remote conferences, they they do a lot of online presentations, and they stream them from a variety of services. I know SIGGRAPH last year utilized YouTube for their streaming, and some of the presenters are choosing to post their videos for free on YouTube. So then you get like expertise. So I guess there's actually one resource that I didn't think about, but let me see if I can find it. Oh yeah, here it is. So another really good resource that is free, um,
Mm-hmm.
is well, it's free and pay, so it just depends. Is the GDC Vault. So GDC Vault is an archive of all their talks and everything, and so there's a paid component and then there's a free component. You'd be surprised on how much amazing content is free. So it's a good resource because like one thing that's awesome about the internet today is
Mm-hmm.
YouTube. One thing that's not so awesome today about the internet today is YouTube, in a sense that there is so much content there, and
Yeah.
it's hard to discern what the good content is and the bad content. So,
Right.
as somebody learning something new, you always want to build a foundation first. But
Mm-hmm.
then once you really, really have a strong foundation, you can learn from almost anywhere because you're equipped with discernment on
Yeah.
which resources are good and which ones are bad. And so, even for myself, I'm just like, I'm superhero now. I can learn everything I've ever wanted to learn. Uh, because I know stuff. And then you get on YouTube and you can like, okay, that person's just giving bad advice. Oh, this one's really good. Let's learn from this person. So the last resource that I can share is Ubisoft Next Challenge. So every year, oh, I have to accept cookies. There you go.
What?
Um, every year they have a student challenge for current students and recent grads. I forget all the requirements, but check the website. And then it's a contest that you can apply for, take on the challenge, build something cool, get to beat people if you come to the event. I don't know what the plans are for this year, but essentially the winners of that end up with a paid apprenticeship. And sometimes that apprenticeship turns into full-time employment. So that is the coolest way to start up in the industry,
Mm-hmm.
because you're actually in the field. You're not getting our coffee. You're actually expected to do stuff, and so it's a good sort of starting point. Another really nice way to start up the industry, if you're brand new to it,
Mm-hmm.
is applying for like testing jobs. So then once you graduate from school, start focusing on building your portfolio. I know my company sometimes does portfolio review events and things for students, so they do a lot of outreach to students in schools. So just be keep an eye out. And Yeah, maybe like if you're there but you're not quite getting the job you want, apply for a tester position. A lot of times testers can be it's a step in the door, and you're working with production people. So like if we didn't have our testers, we wouldn't have a game, and so they're an essential part of the team. And essentially, there are opportunities for mentorship, either officially or unofficially. And I've known a lot of testers that have moved into roles on production. So those are
That's
some
cool.
ways to kind of start off your career, or if you're just curious and making games for fun.
Mm-hmm.
Unreal Engine is free. Unity is free, and my favorite Blender is free.
Yeah.
So those are really good starting points. You can build games. You can even build digital cinematics. Like I don't know if you're following like The Mandalorian. They're
Mm-hmm.
using Unreal for all the digital set extension. So the tools are powerful and they've never been more accessible than they've ever been.
Yeah. Were any of like I guess you have been to GDC. Have you been to any of the other ones that you mentioned and or like I don't know, have a video on one of those vaults?
I wish. I have been to SIGGRAPH a few times, and been both as a student and in my professional life. GDC I've yet to go to. I think I attended a virtual GDC since the pandemic started. It's quite cool because one of my favorite sections of GDC is the Tech Art Bootcamp, which is sort of tech artists talking to tech artists about tech art, and sometimes they invite programmers and other
Mm-hmm.
developers. And the beauty of it is really like for technical art or anything really, it's not just about making something awesome. It's really about how you thought about how to make the thing awesome, what problems you solved, what process you use to identify what solutions you need, and follow through in execution. And because there's art in the title, you do have to have a sense of what looks good. So having a basic understanding of composition. Um, I'd like to say you need color theory, but you don't. But it's in there, like and you can if you make a tool for someone, um, try to make a tool that has presets that kind of make sense, that do something compelling right off the bat. That's going to be the tool that everybody's going to appreciate the most. So, yeah, if you're going specifically in a tech art direction, one other skill that I would recommend, or if you're going into some sort of like programming direction, um, spend some time to learn a little bit of user experience design and a little bit of sort of the interactions and how that works. And that's kind of a big thing for me because if you ask me, the one area that I really love looking in is tools.
Mm.
And so it's always been fun to sort of learn how people interact with things and sort of that dynamic there, and then design your tools around those ideas.
All right. That's awesome. I don't think Cha has anything else they want to ask. Do you have anything you'd like to say to conclude this, I guess, session?
Um, no, I can't think of anything. Thank you for inviting me, and thanks
No.
for the
Well,
interview.
thank you. Yeah, okay, that's awesome. I think we learned like a lot, at least I have, and it was really fun talking to you. And yeah, so we actually have a thing where we like ask our guests to close in prayer. If you would like to close us in prayer, that would be
Sure, I
awesome.
don't want to break tradition.
Yeah.
All right. Heavenly Father, Lord, just thank you for this time, Lord. Just I thank you personally for the opportunities that you've granted me to learn, but I most thank you for the opportunity to share the experiences that you've given me and the lessons that you've taught me, Lord. I thank you, Lord, for the Lightly Salted organization and everybody involved, and just their unique vision to really sort of reach people in a way or in a place that might not necessarily have been reached before. And just thank you for just your work and your Holy Spirit behind the scenes, Lord. And I say over and over, you're our artist, Lord, and you're our technical artist, and you're our great architect in so many
Hmm.
ways. And I just thank you, Heavenly Father, for all that you do and all that you and who you are, Lord. In your name I pray. Amen.
Amen. All right, thank you, Sean. I'm just gonna go over some announcements. You're free to stay or leave. um, Everyone, thank you for joining us. And we have, I guess, let's go through some announcements. We have a Pokemon tournament coming up. Everything is free to join, and there is prizes. So, and also viewership prizes for people who might not have the, I guess, Pokemon knowledge. But anyone's free to join. So, yeah, you can check out our Discord or our website to find out how to sign up. And yeah, it's a six. You pick. Oh, we're using it's a Pokemon the newest generation, Sword and Shield. And they have a we're using official Pokemon tournament rules. So it's gonna be a doubles game. So you have two Pokemons fighting other two Pokemons. You have to register six Pokemon, and you play with four of them, and then you yeah, I guess duel it out, and it'll be best of three for each round. If you guys have any questions about that, you can ask any of the admins or in Discord, and or in the sign up sheet. There's a space for questions as well. And we also have a movie night this Saturday. If you guys are interested in watching movies with us, we'll just be in Discord, and we won't be streaming that, but you can come pop by and we'll watch a movie together. And that's it. Yeah, look forward to. I think next month we have a podcast instead of an interview. But look forward to that, and yeah, have a great evening, everyone. Bye.